The massive space station turned slowly against the orange glow of the gas giant below. The Galactic Defense Academy was the size of a small city, floating in the void between two moons. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went from its docking bays every day. Each one carried the best young minds and strongest warriors from across known space. Captain Jaewon Kim stood at the observation deck window, watching another transport ship approach. He knew what would come off that ship. More alien cadets with abilities that made humans look weak. More species with natural armor, enhanced strength, or minds that could move objects without touching them. More reminders that humans were the odd ones out in this galaxy. Jaewon was 42 years old, with gray streaks in his black hair and scars on his hands from years of fixing broken equipment. He had been teaching at the academy for 6 years now. In all that time, he remained the only human instructor. Sometimes he wondered why they kept him around at all. The answer walked through his classroom door every morning. While other instructors taught advanced combat techniques or quantum physics, Jaewon taught survival basics: how to fix a broken air recycler, how to find water on a dead planet, how to stay alive when everything goes wrong and there is no one coming to help you. Most students thought his classes were beneath them. They were wrong. But Jaewon had stopped trying to convince them years ago. The classroom door slid open with a soft hiss. 3 students entered, moving with the fluid grace that marked them as Vorthak. The Vorthak were one of the most respected warrior races in the galaxy. They stood 7 feet tall with thick gray skin that could stop most small weapons. Their eyes were solid black, and their hearing was so sharp they could detect a heartbeat from across a room. These 3 were different, though. They were cubs, barely 16 years old in human terms, the youngest Vorthak ever admitted to the academy. The first was Minho, the leader of the group. His gray skin was lighter than most adult Vorthak, marking his youth, but his posture was perfectly military. He moved like he was born wearing armor, which was not far from the truth. Vorthak's skin grew thicker as they aged, eventually becoming nearly bulletproof. Behind him came Tae-woo, slightly smaller but with the same proud bearing. He carried a datapad and was constantly taking notes. Even among the Vorthak, he was known for his sharp mind and perfect memory. The third was Hana, the only female in the group. She was faster than the males, which was typical for her species. Female Vorthak were the scouts and hunters, while males became heavy infantry. But all 3 shared the same trait that made their species famous across the galaxy. They never gave up, never retreated, and never left their own behind. Jaewon had been teaching them for 3 months now. At first, they had barely tolerated his presence. A human teaching Vorthak warriors seemed like an insult, but slowly they had begun to pay attention. Maybe it was because Jaewon treated them like students instead of celebrities. Or maybe they were just curious about the strange human who did not seem impressed by their reputation. Today we are going to talk about emergency protocols, Jaewon said as the 3 took their seats. The classroom was small, designed for basic instruction rather than the grand lecture halls where famous alien professors taught hundreds of students at once. Minho raised one clawed hand. "Sir, we have already memorized all standard emergency procedures. Our people have been warriors for 10,000 years. Jaewon nodded. "I am sure you have. But tell me, what do you do when the standard procedures do not work?" The 3 cubs looked at each other. This was not the kind of question they were used to hearing. "You follow backup protocols," Tae-woo said. "And when those fail?" "You follow tertiary protocols," Hana answered. "And when everything fails and you are alone in the dark with no one coming to save you?" Silence filled the room. The Vorthak were never alone. They fought in packs, lived in clans, and died together if necessary. The idea of being truly alone was foreign to them. "You improvise," Jaewon said simply. "You use whatever is around you. You break the rules. You do things that make no sense to anyone else. And maybe, if you are lucky and stubborn enough, you survive. He walked to the front of the classroom, where a holographic display showed the Academy's layout. The galaxy is full of species with natural advantages. The Zephyrians can manipulate energy with their minds. The Nebulites can change their physical state at will. The Corvin have armor that grows from their bones. The display shifted, showing representatives of different alien races. Each one looked powerful, dangerous, evolved for survival. Humans have none of these advantages, Jaewon continued. We are slow compared to most species. We are weak. Our senses are limited. We die easily. He paused, looking at each of the three cubs. So how did we survive long enough to reach the stars? Minho spoke first. Humans are clever. You build tools. So do many other species. Try again. You work together, Hana offered. Better, but still not unique. The Vorthak have stronger pack bonds than humans. Taewoo frowned, thinking hard. You adapt quickly to new situations. Jaewon smiled. Getting warmer. But let me show you something. He pressed a button on his teaching console. The lights in the classroom suddenly went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting strange shadows on the walls. An alarm began to sound, but not the familiar Academy emergency signal. This was something else, something wrong. The three Vorthak cubs immediately stood, falling into defensive positions. Their enhanced senses would be working overtime now, analyzing every sound and smell for threats. This is not a drill, Jaewon said calmly. Something has happened to the Academy's main power grid. Through the classroom window, they could see other parts of the station going dark. Ships in the distance changed course, some heading toward the Academy while others moved away. Whatever was happening, it was big. Jaewon's communication device crackled to life. All instructors report to emergency stations immediately. We have a Code 7 situation in the training sector. Code 7 meant students in immediate danger. The cubs looked at Jaewon, waiting for orders. Even in crisis, they maintained their discipline. What is a Code 7? Minho asked. Jaewon was already moving toward the door. It means someone is about to learn why humans survived long enough to reach the stars, he said. Come on, class is now in session. As they left the classroom, none of them knew that within the hour, three Vorthak cubs would be drifting helplessly toward the most dangerous region of space known to any species. And only one human would be stubborn enough to try saving them. The real lesson was about to begin. The emergency command center buzzed with activity as aliens from dozens of species worked at their stations. Holographic displays showed the Academy from every angle, with red warning lights blinking across multiple sectors. Jaewon pushed through, the crowd, the three Vorthak cubs following close behind him. Admiral Kyung-soo, a tall Alterian with blue crystalline skin, stood at the center of it all. His four arms moved quickly between different control panels as he coordinated the emergency response. When he saw Jaewon approach, his expression grew even more grim. Captain Kim, we have a serious problem, the Admiral said. His voice carried the musical tones typical of his species, but there was no beauty in it now. A solar storm hit us 20 minutes ago, much stronger than our sensors predicted. Jaewon looked at the main display screen. It showed the Academy's training sector, but something was wrong with the image. Parts of it flickered and jumped, like a broken video feed. The electromagnetic pulse damaged our training pods, Admiral Kyung-soo continued. Most of them made it back to the docking bays safely. But one pod lost all navigation control. The display zoomed in on a single blinking dot, moving away from the Academy. It was small and alone, drifting in the wrong direction. Who is on that pod? Jaewon asked, though part of him already knew the answer would be bad. 3 students from your survival class, the young Vorthak cubs. Jaewon felt his stomach drop. Behind him, he heard Minho take a sharp breath. The cubs were listening to every word. Where is the pod headed? Taewoo asked, stepping forward. His usual calm was cracking, and Jaewon could hear the worry in his voice. Admiral Kyung-soo touched another control, and the display pulled back to show a wider view of local space. The Academy sat near the edge of a stellar system, protected by the gravity well of a large gas giant. But beyond that protective zone lay something that made even veteran spacers nervous. The death zone, the Admiral said quietly. Every conversation in the command center stopped. Even species that had never heard the name before seemed to understand that it meant something terrible. The death zone stretched across 3 light years of space, a region where reality itself seemed broken. Massive electromagnetic storms raged constantly, powerful enough to fry any electronic system in seconds. Gravity fields shifted without warning, crushing ships or flinging them into the void. No one knew what had created the zone, but everyone knew what it did to ships that entered it. It destroyed them. "How long before the pod reaches the zone boundary?" Jaewon asked. "At current drift speed, maybe 4 hours," Admiral Kyung-soo replied. "But that assumes the storms do not pull them in faster." The main display showed a new image now. The death zone looked like a wall of churning energy, streaked with lightning that stretched between stars. Even from a safe distance, it was terrifying to look at. "We have already sent out rescue ships," the Admiral continued. "The Alterian fleet has 3 fast cruisers en route. The Corvan military dispatched their best assault craft. Even the Zephyrians are sending a ship, and they rarely leave their home systems." Jaewon studied the display, watching the rescue ships move toward the drifting pod. They were fast, much faster than the old pod could ever be. But as he watched, something started to bother him about their approach vectors. "They are all stopping," he said. Admiral Kyung-soo nodded grimly. "The zone affects different species in different ways. The Alterian ships cannot function once the electromagnetic interference reaches a certain level. Their bioneural computers shut down completely." "What about the Corvan ships?" "Their natural armor actually works against them in the zone. The gravitational fields interact with the metal in their bone structures. The forces would tear them apart from the inside." Jaewon looked at each rescue ship on the display, watching them hold position at what appeared to be a safe distance from the zone. They were trying, but they could not get close enough to help. "The Zephyrians?" he asked. "Their energy manipulation abilities become uncontrolled in the zone's electromagnetic fields. They could end up destroying the very people they are trying to save." A new voice cut through the command center chatter. It was deep and commanding, with the growling undertones that marked it as Vorthak. "Then we will go ourselves." Everyone turned to see a figure striding through the crowd. She was nearly 8 feet tall, with the dark gray skin of a mature Vorthak warrior. Scars marked her arms and face, each one telling the story of a battle survived. Her military insignia showed her rank as War Commander, one of the highest positions. "In the Vorthak military, War Commander Soo-young," Admiral Kyung-soo said with respect. "We did not expect you so soon." "I was at the nearest base when I received word," she replied. Her black eyes swept the command center before settling on the 3 cubs standing behind Jaewon. "I came as soon as I learned my son was in danger." Minyo stepped forward, his young face trying to maintain proper military bearing. "Mother." War Commander Soo-young's expression softened for just a moment before returning to professional coldness. "We brought our fastest ships. Our warriors are ready to enter the zone and retrieve the cubs." "Commander, with respect," Admiral Kyung-soo said carefully, "the zone will affect your people the same way it affects everyone else. Your enhanced senses will be overwhelmed by the chaos. Your ships will lose navigation. Then we will fly manually. The gravitational fields will crush your vessels before you get within rescue range." War Commander Soo-young's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Jaewon thought she might attack the Admiral just for suggesting her people could fail, but instead, she turned to look at the display showing her son's pod drifting towards certain death. "There has to be a way," she said, And for the first time, her voice carried something other than confidence. Jae-won studied the tactical display, watching the patterns of rescue ships maintaining their safe distances. Each species had natural advantages that made them superior to humans in almost every way. But those same advantages were becoming weaknesses in the face of the zone's chaos. "Captain Kim," Admiral Kyung-soo said, noticing Jae-won's attention to the display. "Do you have any suggestions?" All eyes in the command center turned to the lone human. Representatives from a dozen species, each one naturally superior to his own, waited to hear what he might say. War Commander Soo-young looked at him with barely concealed desperation. Jae-won thought about his morning class, about the question he had asked the Cubs. What do you do when standard procedures fail, when backup plans do not work, when you are alone in the dark with no one coming to save you? You improvise. "I need to see the Academy's ship inventory," he said. "Everything. We have, including the old stuff in storage. The old ships are not suitable for rescue operations," Admiral Kyung-soo protested. "They are not suitable for normal operations," Jae-won corrected. "But the zone is not normal." War Commander Soo-young stepped closer to him. Even through her desperation, her presence was intimidating. A lifetime of battle had made her into something that lesser beings feared instinctively. "Human," she said, and the word carried both question and challenge. "What are you thinking?" Jae-won looked up at her, meeting those black eyes without flinching. "I am thinking that sometimes the greatest strength is not what evolution gives you, but what it does not take away." On the display, the pod continued its slow drift toward the death zone, carrying 3 young Vorthak cubs toward a fate that no species in the galaxy seemed able to prevent. But Jae-won was already moving toward the ship inventory terminal, an idea forming in his mind, an idea so simple and so dangerous that only a human would be foolish enough to try it. The clock was ticking, and time was running out. The old hangar bay smelled of rust and abandoned dreams. Ships that had not flown in decades sat covered in dust, forgotten relics from the early days of galactic exploration. Jae-won walked between them, his footsteps echoing in the vast space, while War Commander Soo-young followed close behind. "These vessels are ancient," she said, her voice filled with doubt. "Some of them are older than my grandfather." "That is exactly what we need," Jae-won replied, stopping in front of a small, battered shuttle. It looked nothing like the sleek, modern ships that filled the Academy's main hangars. This one was all straight lines and exposed metal, built for function rather than beauty. The shuttle bore the markings of Earth's early space program. Faded letters on the hull read, Terra Explorer 7. It had been built almost a century ago when humans first reached beyond their solar system and discovered they were not alone in the universe. "This thing will never survive the death zone," War Commander Soo-young said flatly. "It has no bioneural systems, no adaptive armor, no quantum shielding." "Exactly," Jae-won said, running his hand along the shuttle's hull. "Every ship out there trying to rescue your son has advanced systems, and every one of those systems is failing in the zone." He opened the shuttle's cargo bay and began pulling out old equipment. Most of it was purely mechanical, the kind of technology that humans used before they learned to build thinking machines. Admiral Kyung-soo appeared at the hangar entrance, moving quickly on his 4 legs. Behind him came a crowd of Academy staff and students, all drawn by news that the human instructor was planning something impossible. "Captain Kim, this is madness," the Admiral said. "You cannot seriously intend to fly that antique into the death zone." "Why not?" Jae-won asked, not looking up from his equipment check. "It has everything I need. Manual controls, mechanical backup, systems, and most importantly, no computer smart enough to panic." War Commander Soo-young watched him work, her warrior instincts warring with her desperation. "Even if this ship could somehow reach the zone, what makes you think you can succeed? Where our best pilots have failed?" Jae-won stopped working and looked at her directly. "Commander, What is the first thing a Vorthak warrior learns? To never retreat, she answered immediately. And what does a Vorthak do when facing a superior enemy? We find their weakness and exploit it. Then you understand, Jaewon said. The zone is not our enemy. It is a force of nature. And forces of nature do not have strategies or intelligence. They just follow patterns. He activated a portable holographic display, showing the death zone's electromagnetic storms. To most observers, it looked like pure chaos. But Jaewon had been studying the patterns for hours. His human brain evolved to see order in apparent randomness. There, he said, pointing to a section of the display. Every 47 minutes, the storm intensity drops in this corridor, for exactly 90 seconds. That is not enough time to mount a rescue, Admiral Kyung-soo protested. It is, if you are already in position and ready to move, Jaewon replied. Modern ships cannot get that close because their systems shut down. But this old shuttle does not have systems to shut down. It just has engines, life support, and mechanical controls. The crowd around them had grown larger. Students and instructors from a dozen species watched the human prepare his ancient vessel. Many of them looked skeptical. Others seemed curious about what this supposedly inferior species might accomplish. War Commander Soo-young placed a massive hand on the shuttle's hull. Human, if you are wrong about this, you will die, and my son will still be lost. If I do nothing, he dies anyway, Jaewon said simply. At least this way, someone tries. Why? She asked. You have no obligation to my people. Humans and Vorthak have no alliance, no treaties. Why would you risk your life for cubs that are not your own? Jaewon paused in his preparations. It was a fair question, and he was not entirely sure he knew the answer himself. A few months ago, your son asked me a question, he said finally. He wanted to know why humans never developed natural armor or enhanced strength like other species. Do you know what I told him? War Commander Soo-young shook her head. I told him that evolution is not about becoming the strongest or the fastest. It is about becoming the most adaptable. And the most human trait of all is that we do not leave people behind, even when it makes no sense. He climbed into the shuttle's pilot seat, running through pre-flight checks on instruments that most spacers would consider primitive. The controls were all manual, requiring constant attention and adjustment. There were no automated systems to take over if the pilot became tired or distracted. The zone changes everything it touches, Jaewon continued, his hands moving over, switches and dials. It turns advantages into weaknesses, strengths into vulnerabilities. But it cannot change what we choose to do. The shuttle's engines coughed to life, filling the hangar with the sound of controlled explosions. It was a harsh, mechanical noise, nothing like the smooth hum of modern propulsion systems. Admiral Kyung-soo stepped forward. Captain Kim, I am ordering you to stand down. This mission is too dangerous. With respect, Admiral, Jaewon said, not, looking away from his instruments. You are not my commanding officer. I volunteer for this mission under emergency protocols. You will have no backup, no support ships, no communication once you enter the zone, the Admiral warned. Then I better not make any mistakes, Jaewon replied. War Commander Soo-young moved to the shuttle's open door. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something else, some final warning or plea. Instead, she stepped back and raised her hand in the Vorthak military salute. Bring them home, human, she said. Other voices began to join hers. Students and instructors from across the galaxy, species that had never agreed on anything, all focused on one simple hope, that an ancient human shuttle and a stubborn pilot might succeed where their advanced technology had failed. Jaewon sealed the shuttle's door and began taxiing toward the hangar's magnetic launch tunnel. Through his forward window, he could see space beyond, and somewhere in that darkness, 3 young Vorthak cubs drifting toward certain death. The launch tunnel accelerated the shuttle forward, pushing it out into the void at tremendous speed. Within minutes, Jaewon could see the death zone ahead of him, a wall of chaotic energy that had destroyed every ship foolish enough to challenge it. His radio crackled with final messages from the Academy, technical data, weather updates, and dozens of voices wishing him luck in languages he did not understand. Then the electromagnetic interference began, and the radio went silent. Jaewon was alone now, flying an antique shuttle toward the most dangerous region of space known to any species. His only advantages were mechanical systems that should have been obsolete decades ago, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that impossible meant impossible. Behind him, the galaxy watched and waited. Ahead, the Tempest raged. The edge of the death zone hit Jaewon like a physical blow. His shuttle shuddered as electromagnetic waves washed over the hull, and every loose piece of equipment rattled in its mounting. The stars outside disappeared, replaced by sheets of crackling energy that stretched in all directions. His instruments went wild for a moment before settling into erratic patterns. The navigation computer died completely, just as he had expected. The autopilot shut down. Even his communications array sparked and went silent. But the mechanical flight controls still responded to his touch, and the engines still pushed the shuttle forward. This was what the other rescue ships could not handle. Their advanced systems were too sophisticated, too dependent on electronic precision. When the zone's chaos overwhelmed their computers, the ships became helpless. But Jaewon's ancient shuttle was too simple to be confused. He flew by sight and instinct now, watching the energy storms swirl around him. What looked like pure chaos to computer sensors revealed patterns to his human eyes. The storms moved in spirals, following gravitational currents that could be predicted if you understood the underlying forces. His first challenge came 20 minutes into the zone. A massive electromagnetic pulse, stronger than anything his shuttle's sensors could measure, rolled toward him like a wave of invisible fire. Modern ships would have tried to shield themselves, only to have their protective systems overloaded and destroyed. Jaewon did something different. He turned off every non-essential system in the shuttle and let the pulse wash over him. The lights flickered and died. His heating system shut down. For 30 seconds, he flew in complete darkness, breathing recycled air and hoping his engines would restart. They did. The pulse passed, and his systems came back online one by one. A more advanced ship would have suffered permanent damage, but his simple machinery was too crude to be permanently hurt. The scanner showed him what he was looking for, a small blip on the edge of detection range, moving slowly through the chaos. The Vorthak Cub's pod, still intact but running out of time. Getting to them would be the hard part. The pod was caught in a gravitational eddy, a swirling current of space-time that kept it moving in a slow spiral. At the center of that spiral was something that made Jaewon's blood run cold. A micro-singularity, a black hole no bigger than a marble but containing the mass of a small moon. The Cubs were being pulled slowly toward that tiny point of infinite gravity. Their pod's emergency thrusters were firing constantly, but they were not strong enough to break free. In perhaps an hour, tidal forces would tear the pod apart, and nothing in the galaxy would be able to save them. Jaewon began his approach, flying in a complex pattern that used the gravitational currents to his advantage. This was three-dimensional navigation at its most difficult, requiring him to think in terms of curved space-time rather than simple straight-line movement. His shuttle bucked and twisted as gravity fields grabbed at it. Warning lights flashed across his control panel as systems strained beyond their design limits. A normal pilot would have pulled back, recognizing the danger, but Jaewon pressed forward, using the chaos as a tool rather than fighting against it. He got within visual range of the pod just as another electromagnetic storm struck. This one was different, more intense than the pulse that had hit him earlier. Lightning arced between his shuttle and the pod, bright enough to hurt his eyes even through the filtered windows. Half his control systems died instantly. The main engine sputtered and went silent. backup power failed. For a terrifying moment, Jaewon thought he had pushed too far and lost everything. Then the manual controls responded to his touch. Pure mechanical linkages, too simple to be damaged by electromagnetic interference. He could still steer, still control his attitude thrusters. It would have to be enough. The pod was close now, less than 100 meters away. Through its small windows, he could see movement inside. The cubs were still alive, still conscious. One of them, probably Minho, was pressed against the window looking out at Jaewon's shuttle. But the gravitational spiral was tightening. Both vessels were being pulled inexorably toward the microsingularity. Jaewon had perhaps 10 minutes before. Tidal forces made rescue impossible. He activated his magnetic docking clamps and began the most delicate maneuver of his career. The two ships had to match velocity and rotation perfectly while spiraling through a gravitational field that changed strength and direction every few seconds. His first attempt failed when a gravity wave pushed the shuttle too high. The second attempt failed when the pod's emergency thrusters fired at the wrong moment, pushing it away from his docking collar. Time was running out. The microsingularity was pulling both ships faster now, and Jaewon could feel the tidal forces starting to affect his shuttle. Metal creaked as different parts of his ship experienced slightly different gravitational pulls. On his third attempt, everything went right for exactly the right moment. The two ships matched velocities in the brief calm between gravity waves. His docking clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk that he felt through his pilot's seat. But they were still falling toward the singularity, and now his shuttle was carrying extra mass that made maneuvering even more difficult. Jaewon fired his thrusters at maximum power, trying to break free from the gravitational spiral. For a moment, it seemed to work. The shuttle climbed away from the microsingularity, fighting against forces that wanted to tear it apart. Then his fuel gauge hit 0. The main engines died, leaving only his small maneuvering thrusters. There was not enough power to escape the gravitational well, not enough thrust to carry both ships to safety. But Jaewon had one more trick, one final gamble that would either save them all or destroy them instantly. He waited until the gravitational spiral carried them close to another massive energy discharge, one of the zone's constant electromagnetic storms. Then, at precisely the right moment, he fired his remaining thrusters not away from the singularity, but toward it. For 3 terrifying seconds, both ships accelerated directly toward the point of infinite gravity. The pod's hull began to buckle under tidal stress. Warning alarms screamed in languages from across the galaxy. Then the electromagnetic storm hit them, and everything changed. The storm's magnetic field interacted with the singularity's gravity in ways that conventional physics could barely describe. Space-time itself twisted, creating a brief window where the normal rules did not apply. Jaewon's shuttle, with its simple metal hull, became a conductor for forces beyond imagination. The electromagnetic storm grabbed both ships and flung them away from the singularity like a giant invisible hand. They tumbled through space, spinning wildly, but they were free. The micro-singularity fell behind them, no longer able to drag them to destruction. Jaewon fought to stabilize their wild spin, using only his tiny maneuvering thrusters. It took precious minutes to get both ships under control, but finally they were flying straight and level through the zone's chaos. The hard part was over. Now all he had to do was get them home. Through the pod's window, he could see Minho looking at him with something like wonder. The young Vorthak warrior had witnessed something that would have been impossible for any other species to attempt. A human had danced with death itself and won. But the dance was not over yet. They still had to escape the zone, and Jaewon's fuel tanks were empty. The journey home would have to be made on momentum and prayer, navigating by starlight through the galaxy's most dangerous region. Behind them, the micro-singularity continued, its eternal spin, waiting for the next ship foolish enough to come too close. Ahead lay the long road home. Jaewon had been flying for 6 hours without fuel, guiding 2 ships through the death zone on momentum alone. His eyes burned from staring at instrument panels, lit only by emergency power. His hands ached from constant small adjustments to keep them on course. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, but rest would mean death for all of them. The cubs had awakened 2 hours ago. Through the pod's small windows, he could see them moving around, checking their own systems and trying to help however they could. Minho pressed his face to the window regularly, watching Jaewon work with fascination. The young Vorthak had never seen a human push beyond normal limits before. In Vorthak culture, warriors fought until they won or died, but they relied on natural strength and superior equipment. What Jaewon was doing was different. He was using pure determination to overcome impossible odds, making thousands of tiny course corrections to navigate hazards that should have killed them hours ago. His communication system crackled occasionally with fragments of transmissions from the outside galaxy. Most of it was static, but sometimes he caught bits of conversation from the rescue fleet still waiting at the zone's edge. Human shuttle still moving. Impossible that anything could survive this long. Vorthak War Fleet requests. Permission to... The transmissions faded back into static, but they told Jaewon that the galaxy was watching. Somehow, word of his rescue attempt had spread beyond the Academy. Ships from dozens of species were gathering at the death zone's boundary, waiting to see if a single human could accomplish what their combined fleets could not. No pressure at all. A new challenge appeared on his sensors, a gravitational anomaly directly ahead, too large to go around with his limited maneuvering fuel. It was the kind of obstacle that would have been easy to handle with full power, but now it might as well have been a solid wall. Jaewon studied his options, running calculations in his head. He could try to slip past the anomaly's edge, but that would take them dangerously close to another electromagnetic storm. He could attempt to ride the gravitational current like a river, but without engine power, he would have no way to escape if something went wrong, or he could do something that no alien pilot would ever consider. He activated the pod's communication system, speaking directly to the cubs for the first time since the rescue began. "Minho, can you hear me?" The young Vorthak's voice came back immediately, strong despite everything they had been through. "Yes, Captain Kim, we are all here. Tae-woo and Hana are fine." "Good. I need you to do exactly what I tell you when I tell you to do it. We are going to use your pod's emergency thrusters to help steer both our ships." "Our thrusters are nearly depleted," Minho replied. "We have maybe 30 seconds of burn time left." "That should be enough," Jaewon said, though he was not entirely sure himself. "When I give the signal, fire your forward thrusters for exactly 3 seconds. Not more, not less." He positioned both ships carefully, using the gravitational anomaly's pull to line up their trajectory. It was like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster, but gradually the angle became right. "Now," he called. The pod's thrusters fired, pushing both ships in a direction that seemed completely wrong. Instead of moving away from the gravitational anomaly, they accelerated toward it. For a moment, Jaewon thought he had miscalculated, that they were about to be crushed by forces beyond imagination. Then the anomaly's gravity grabbed them and flung them forward like a slingshot. Both ships accelerated rapidly, gaining speed. They could never have achieved with their depleted fuel supplies. The maneuver was dangerous, but it bought them precious momentum for the journey home. "Incredible," came Tae-woo's voice over the radio. "How did you know that would work?" "Humans have been using gravity assists for centuries," Jaewon replied, fighting to keep his voice steady as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. But the effort had cost him. His vision was starting to blur, and his hands shook on the controls. He had been awake for over 20 hours, most of it spent in life-or-death concentration. His body was reaching the limits of human endurance. Another voice came over the radio, this one belonging to Hana. Captain Kim, you need to rest. Let us help navigate. You do not have the experience for zone flying, Jaewon replied automatically. Then teach us, Minho said. You have been teaching us all semester. This is just another lesson. Despite everything, Jaewon found himself smiling. The Cubs were right. This was exactly the kind of situation he had been trying to prepare them for in his survival classes. When all the advanced systems fail, when there is no backup plan, when you are alone in the dark with no one coming to save you, you improvise, you adapt, you refuse to give up. All right, he said. Here is how we navigate by starlight. For the next 4 hours, Jaewon taught the Cubs to read the subtle signs that marked safe passage through the zone. How to use distant stars as reference points when all electronic navigation failed. How to recognize the warning signs of an approaching electromagnetic storm. How to feel the gravitational currents that could help or hinder their progress. The Cubs learned quickly, their sharp minds adapting to concepts that most academy students never encountered. Soon, Minho was calling out course corrections while Hana monitored their improvised life support systems. Taiwu used his perfect memory to track their position relative to landmarks they had passed hours earlier. It became a team effort with the human providing experience and the young Vorthak providing fresh eyes and steady nerves. Together, they navigated hazards that would have defeated any single pilot, no matter how skilled. The edge of the zone appeared gradually, marked by the slow return of normal starlight. The chaotic energy storms faded behind them, and the gravitational anomalies became less frequent. After 18 hours in hell, they were finally approaching safety. Jaewon's radio crackled to life as they crossed the boundary. Dozens of voices called out in different languages, all expressing the same amazement. The human had done it. Against all odds, using an antique ship and pure stubbornness, he had brought the Cubs home. Terra Explorer 7. This is Admiral Kyung-soo, came the familiar musical voice of the Alterian commander. We have you on sensors. Medical teams are standing by. Acknowledged, Admiral, Jaewon replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. 3 Cubs recovered, all alive and healthy. Request immediate docking with the Academy Medical Bay. Request. Granted, Captain Kim, and well done. Through his forward window, Jaewon could see the lights of dozens of ships spread across local space. The entire rescue fleet had waited for him. Representatives from species that rarely cooperated, all united in hope that one stubborn human could achieve the impossible. War Commander Soo-young's voice came over a private channel, thick with emotion, that she could barely contain. Human, I do not have words to express. No words needed, Commander, Jaewon interrupted gently. Just have a medical team ready. Your son and his friends have been through a lot. As they approached the academy, Jaewon allowed himself to relax for the first time in almost a full day. The Cubs were safe. The mission was complete. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species were beginning to understand that humans might not be as weak as they appeared. The shuttle's docking clamps engaged with a soft thunk. Through the airlock came the sounds of controlled chaos as medical teams rushed to check on the Cubs. But Jaewon remained in his pilot's seat for a moment longer, looking out at the stars. He had entered the death zone as an instructor teaching a survival class. He was returning as something else entirely. A reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is not what evolution gives you, but what you refuse to let it take away. The Cubs were home. The lesson was complete, and the galaxy would never look at humans quite the same way again. 3 days after the rescue, the Academy's main auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Students from every species pressed together in the vast space, their usual territorial instincts forgotten in the face of something unprecedented. They had come to hear a story that was already spreading across the galaxy, changing how entire civilizations thought about strength and survival. Captain Jaewon Kim stood at the podium, looking remarkably ordinary for someone who had just accomplished the impossible. His uniform was crisp and clean, his gray-streaked hair neatly combed. The only signs of his ordeal were the dark circles under his eyes and the faint tremor in his hands from exhaustion that had not yet fully faded. In the front row sat 3 young Vorthak, healthy and alert, despite their 18-hour journey through hell. Minho sat at attention in his academy uniform, but his black eyes never left the human who had saved his life. Beside him, Taewoo and Hana waited with the same focused intensity. Behind them, War Commander Su-young occupied a place of honor, her massive frame somehow managing to fit into a standard academy chair. She had not spoken much since her son's return, but everyone knew that the fierce Vorthak warrior had been seen crying openly when the medical teams declared the cubs completely unharmed. "The Academy has asked me to explain what happened in the death zone," Jaewon began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "But before I do that, I want to talk about something more important. I want to talk about what we learned." Admiral Kyung-soo nodded from his position at the side of the stage. The Alterian commander had spent the past 3 days fielding communications from across the galaxy. Military academies, research institutions, and government officials all wanted to understand how a single human had succeeded where their advanced fleets had failed. "Every species in this room has natural advantages," Jaewon continued. "The Vorthak have strength and armor. The Alterians have 4 arms and enhanced intelligence. The Zephyrians can manipulate energy with their thoughts. The Corvin have bones made of living metal." Murmurs rippled through the audience as students recognized their own species being mentioned. Some nodded with pride, others looked curious about where the human was heading with this observation. "Humans have none of these gifts," Jaewon said simply. "We are weak, slow, and fragile by galactic standards. Our senses are limited. Our lifespans are short. For most of galactic history, we were considered a minor species, barely worth noticing." The auditorium fell completely silent. Even species that typically made constant noise while listening had stopped their usual chatter. But the death zone taught us something important about advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes the very gifts that make you strong can become the things that make you vulnerable. He activated a holographic display showing the zone's chaotic energy patterns. Many students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, remembering how those same patterns had defeated their species' rescue attempts. Advanced computer systems that can process millions of calculations per second become useless when electromagnetic storms scramble every circuit. Enhanced senses that can detect a heartbeat from across a room become torture chambers when gravity waves distort every input. Natural armor that can stop bullets becomes a crushing prison when gravitational fields grab at the metal in your bones. Minho raised his hand, and Jaewon nodded for him to speak. "Captain Kim, what made human technology different? Why did your old ship survive when our advanced vessels could not?" Jaewon smiled. "Because it was not advanced. The Terra Explorer 7 was built with mechanical systems that were already obsolete when it left Earth's shipyards. No computers to be confused, no bio-neural networks to be overloaded, no adaptive systems that could be turned against themselves." "But that doesn't explain how you navigated through the zone," Taewoo added. "The gravitational fields were constantly shifting. No mechanical system could track all those variables." "You are right," Jaewon agreed. "Which is why I did not use a mechanical system. I used something much older and much more reliable." He tapped his forehead with one finger. "I used a human brain, not because it is more powerful than your computers, but because it works differently. Human brains evolved to see patterns in chaos, to find meaning in randomness, to adapt when adaptation seems impossible." The display changed, showing the rescue operation from Jaewon's perspective. Students watched in fascination as he had navigated through gravitational anomalies and electromagnetic storms, finding safe passage where their sensors showed only destruction. Every species develops intelligence in response to their environment, Jaewon explained. Vorthak intelligence focuses on tactics and honor because you are natural warriors. Altarian intelligence emphasizes logic and precision because you evolved from hive-minded ancestors. Human intelligence is different. We developed it to solve problems that had never been solved before. War Commander Soo-young stood up, her massive frame drawing every eye in the auditorium. Human, I have heard the recordings of your rescue operation. You took risks that no Vorthak warrior would consider. Many of your maneuvers should have killed you. You are probably right, Jaewon admitted. But that brings us to the other thing that makes humans different. We do not just refuse to accept that something is impossible. We actively get angry at the idea that we should give up. Laughter rippled through the audience, though it was respectful rather than mocking. They were beginning to understand that what they had always seen as human stubbornness might actually be a form of strength. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, Jaewon continued. It is filled with hazards that can defeat any advantage, overcome any natural gift, but it cannot defeat the decision to keep trying when everyone else has given up. He looked directly at the three cubs in the front row. Minho, Tae-woo, Hana. You spent 18 hours in the death zone. You saw what happened when all our advanced systems failed. What did we do then? Minho stood up, his young voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. We improvised, sir. We adapted. We used whatever we had available. And what did you learn from that experience? That survival is not about having the best equipment or the strongest body, Hana replied. It is about refusing to quit when everything goes wrong. And that sometimes the greatest victories come not from using your advantages, Tae-woo added, but from turning your disadvantages into strengths. Jaewon nodded approvingly. The Academy teaches you to use your natural gifts, and that is important. But I hope this experience has taught you something else. That when your natural gifts fail you, when your advanced technology lets you down, when you are alone in the dark with no one coming to save you, you still have options. The auditorium erupted in applause, a sound that mixed dozens of different species expressing approval in their own ways. But the ovation was not just for Jaewon. It was for an idea that was spreading through the galaxy faster than light itself, that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the most unlikely heroes were the ones who succeeded when everyone else failed. After the formal presentation ended, Jaewon found himself surrounded by students asking questions. How did humans learn to see patterns in chaos? Could other species develop similar skills? What other human techniques might be useful in survival situations? But the conversation that mattered most came from War Commander Soo-young. The massive Vorthak warrior approached him as the crowd began to disperse, her expression unreadable. Human, she said, and for the first time, the word did not sound like a challenge. Commander, my son tells me that you risked your life for cubs who were not of your species, your clan, or your world. This is not logical by most standards. No, Jaewon agreed. It was not logical. Then why did you do it? Jaewon thought for a moment, watching the three cubs as they talked excitedly with other students. Word had already come down from Academy Command that applications from human students were increasing dramatically. Other species wanted to understand what made humans different. Because leaving people behind is not what humans do, he said finally. We may not be the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but we are very good at one thing. We are very good at being human. War Commander Soo-young studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone who witnessed it. The proud Vorthak warrior, descendant of 10,000 years of military tradition, bowed, her head in respect to the human who had saved her son. The galaxy is fortunate to have humans in it, she said. 3 months later, the Galactic Defense Academy announced a new required course for all students regardless of species. Emergency survival and adaptation would be taught by Captain Jaewon. Kim, With guest instructors from other human colonies, the class was always full, with waiting lists that stretched for semesters. Students came not just to learn human techniques, but to understand the mindset that had made the impossible possible. And in the depths of space, the death zone continued its eternal dance of destruction, waiting for the next ship brave enough, or foolish enough to challenge its power. But now it had a different reputation among the spacefaring races. They no longer called it simply the death zone. They called it the place where a human had refused to let 3 cubs die alone in the dark, and in doing so, had reminded the galaxy what true strength really meant. The Tempest still raged, but it no longer seemed quite so impossible to overcome. After all, humans had entered it once and emerged victorious. And humans, the galaxy had learned, did not easily forget how to do something they had already proven possible.